Not sure if anyone can hear me or see me from your end, but um on from my end, the video is like grainy, so I'm not sure if I did this correct or not. I've been having trouble with this lately. Um, let's see. I can see next to the two people little icon things that one person is here. I'm not sure who the person is though. Um, okay, let's see. So the book is called Wish by Damien W. Burns. Wish is a boy diagnosed with bipolar type 2. And the book consists of 26 pages, and that includes the summary and about the author. So, chapter 1, here we go. Chapter 1. There was a time that the clouds were inhabited by different creatures akin to emotions. Their deepest, darkest desires found paths and homes up there. The clouds were divided into sections, which caused several reflections on those who lived down below. Those that lived down below got the better half and felt whatever was going on up in the skies. There was the side where lust resided, dark, stormy, and glaring. That was how it was constantly. Some of a few others that lived in the sky were anger, jealousy, and joy. It went down to the world down below, affecting and influencing those that lived there, becoming one with them, getting into their heads, manifesting themselves as emotions and thoughts. No one down below could really say what was going on up in the skies. The beings that lived in the sky were depictions of human emotions. Wish was a 6-year-old boy who had found himself living in the world in the skies, the world that belonged to emotions. The boy stood atop a mush of clouds. There was a whole lot of wildness around him. From where he stood, he couldn't really see much of what was going on around him, but he could hear most of it, and what he could really hear was the sound of the chaos happening to the left of him. He was young, but he knew a lot about all that went on up in the clouds and was quite ignorant about what went on down below. It had to be envy and jealousy getting into their usual argument. They were always at each other's throats as they proclaimed that one was more superior to the other. They were always on a roll, and no one bothered to settle their spats anyway. Wish stared up at the white winged birds that flew by him, and suddenly a feeling engulfed him. He watched the birds as they moved away in a V-shaped pattern. They are so free, not tethered, the child thought. Wish was alone in the cloudy world that surrounded him, with no end in sight, nor any form of direction. He didn't even remember where he was from. All Wish remembered was waking up in a cloudy sea with no one in sight less than a year ago. If he had any parents, and if he had any family, he knew them not. They were probably not searching for him, and even if they were, for them not to have found him in over a year, it only meant that he was far away from them. He knew he was different from every being that lived up on the clouds. He sometimes wondered if he was from the world down below. He was not sure he would ever know. Wish heard cracks, and he sighed. Envy and jealousy's fight had become physical, as usual. He stepped away from the steep cloudy edge and walked through the cloud-filled fields back to the little alcove he had been residing in for the past year. Having to live alone outside anyone caring or looking out for him had caused the child to mature drastically. And that was why for 6 years he was way older in mind. Wish settled onto the white clouds in his alcove, and he looked all around him. He wondered what the world out there held in store for him. Wish drew his feet up to his chin, and not being able to control his emotions, he broke into tears. Huge dollops of tears rolled down his cheeks as he cried harder. He had no idea why he was crying. Frankly, there was a lot to choose from. He just felt really depressed in that moment. There you go again, crying. It was really such a shame, you know? The voice interrupted Wish, and he raised his tear-stained face. He looked at the bright-colored Pity as he shook her head, or as he shook his head. Every time I see you, kid, you are always crying. So what's the reason this time? Have you finally figured it out? Wish shook his head, and Pity sighed and shrugged as he said, well, there's no way I can help your pain, kid. All I can tell you is sorry. Just stop crying, all right? You are a kid. You should be running around and having fun, not balled up in your quite shabby home. I really do feel sorry for you, and I wish that I could help you, but all I can do is offer my sympathy, you know? Wish nodded his head as he sobbed. Thank you, Pity. How about you head towards the western paths? I hear that Joy lives there, somewhere around there, when she isn't gallivanting down below, spreading cheer to all. You just might find something that cheers you up. I don't think that's going to be of help when I don't even know why I feel such heavy sorrow, Wish said softly. Pity shrugged as he said, why don't you try it out? What do you have to lose? I will go with you, but there's a lot of sad beings down below in the north. I have to go aid them. I do hope you cheer up, kid. Wish watched Pity receding back, and he sighed. Pity was not actually his friend, but he had been the only one who really spoke to him around here. Most of the others just let him be. Pity was right. He was a kid and had nothing holding him back here. He might as well head westward and see what he could find. Wish stood up and he dusted himself. He rubbed his stomach as he felt a slight bit of hunger. Grumbling to himself, the kid started out on the path that led towards the western peaks. He could see a lot going on around him, a great contrast from the area he had just left. He looked back and he sighed. He did not know if he would ever return to the white clouds that he had called home for a year. Before him were darker and murky clouds, the clouds that lust and wrath lived in. He had heard quite a few things about him whenever Pity came over and went on, supposedly trying to cheer him up, but really it was Pity loved talking and retelling his adventures. Wish inhaled a long and short breath and headed down the dark path that snaked up the mountain before him. Why do I have to face such darkness in my quest to find a reason to be happy? Is this even going to be successful? Because I do not feel myself getting any happier, the kid wondered. Just as he got onto a peak, specks of snow started to fall around him from the higher levels of clouds. He looked up at the layer of clouds that lay above the clouds he lived on, marveling at the white specks that were floating down. He had only ever heard of snow from the only person he ever spoke to, Pity. Pity had said how marvelous it was to feel snow up here in this region of the clouds, but he remembered Pity saying that it was more marvelous feeling snow when you were down below. Wish did not know much about what was down below, and sometimes when Pity spoke, he did feel that Pity was exaggerating some of the experiences that he had. But if there was one thing that he was sure Pity had not lied about, it was how marvelous and amazing snow felt, especially when it fell on your tongue. Wish stuck his tongue out, feeling the coolness and tasting the snow on his tongue. Why don't I feel happy when I just experienced something marvelous? The kid wondered. He sighed, and the snow came down in torrents. He found himself a spot to rest his head in a dark, cloudy cave quite similar to his old home, except for the darkened cloud. I would just have to sleep here and wait for Bright to come, Wish said out loud to himself. He curled into a ball as he stared at the swirling snow out there, hoping that sleep could find him this time. Wish had always had difficulty sleeping ever since he woke up on the clouds years ago. Sleeping for him was just like his sorrow. He tried to make the sorrow go away. He tried to make the sleep come to him, but he was never really successful. Sometimes he spent most of his time jumping around so that he could get exhausted, but that plan was rarely ever successful. Bright came very quickly, and Wish jumped to his feet, eager to continue his journey to finding a source of happiness.
Well, I just got off the phone with them. So it'll be a few more minutes and I should be able to use the domain. Somehow they can't send or receive